You wake to darkness so complete it hums. The air smells of jasmine and molten wax, thick enough to taste. Beneath your bare feet, marble sweats with the night's damp chill, and somewhere beyond the lattice screens, a sound rises. It isn't pain. It's surrender made audible, the soft tearing of a spirit that refuses to die quietly. Before we begin tonight's descent into history's most silent chambers, take a moment. Breathe. Tell me where in the world you're watching from, whether it's the warmth of Istanbul, the quiet of London, or the neon buzz of Tokyo. It's strange, isn't it, that across centuries and continents we're connected by one thing: curiosity. So, if this moment has already sent a shiver down your spine, subscribe, and let's walk together into a night that history tried to erase. In 1623, the Ottoman Empire stood at the height of its splendor. Its banners flew from Yemen's burning sands to the frost of Hungary's plains, and at its heart, Topkapi Palace, a living labyrinth of silk, whispers, and secrets. Every courtyard hid a world. Every locked gate was a boundary between life and legend. But beyond its domed chambers and golden fountains lay a deeper silence, the kind that didn't come from peace, but from suppression. That silence broke one night in February. Servants later said they felt it first before they heard it. A tremor through the tiles, like the palace itself was exhaling. Then came the scream, short, sharp, and final, cutting through candlelight and protocol alike. Guards froze. Eunuchs exchanged glances. No one moved because they all knew whose voice that was. Fatma Sultan, daughter of Sultan Ahmed II, sister to princes who would inherit the empire. Barely 15. Her wedding was only weeks away. Tonight was not her wedding night. It was her education. From the outside, it looked like an honor, a princess's preparation for marriage, supervised by the finest women in the empire. But inside those walls, it was something else entirely, a ritual older than the dynasty itself, perfected across generations to tame the daughters of power. They called it terbiye-i gelin, the discipline of the bride. The ceremony began at dusk. Torches flickered in the courtyards as Fatma was escorted through the harem's north corridor. Her silk slippers whispered against Persian carpets. The air carried the scent of rosewater and burning oud. Around her, attendants moved like ghosts, eyes averted, mouths sealed by fear. The chamber waiting for her had no windows. Only one door, and that door would not open again until dawn. Inside, the chief of the harem, an elderly woman named Gulnar Hatun, waited in ceremonial robes, her face a map of lines carved by decades of service. She had trained 13 princesses before this night. None of them were ever the same again. "Remove her ornaments," Gulnar said softly. A bride must meet her fate without the weight of vanity. Golden bracelets clinked as they hit the floor. Fatma's hair, once braided in jewels, was unbound. A thin linen shift replaced her embroidered gown. The transformation was ritualistic, meant to strip away identity, status, and will. The girl who entered as a sultan's daughter would emerge as property of empire. Then came the mirrors, 7 of them, placed in a circle, each one angled so her reflection multiplied infinitely. Fatma stood at the center, surrounded by endless versions of herself. Gulnar's voice echoed, "What do you see?" Fatma hesitated. "A princess." The old woman stepped closer. "No, you see what you were. Look again." Her words carried the weight of an empire that demanded obedience even from its daughters. Fatma lowered her gaze. The ceremony continued. Recitations from the Nasihat al-Muluk, verses about obedience and duty. Each phrase etched into her mind like an invisible tattoo. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the rustle of silk and the distant call of the muezzin. Outside, Istanbul slept under the crescent moon. Inside, Fatma's world was shrinking. Midnight approached. The next phase began. Two attendants brought a small chest carved from ebony. Inside lay a veil, dyed crimson with pomegranate skins, the color of submission. As they lowered it over her head, Fatma's breath quickened. She whispered a prayer, one forbidden in these halls. "Let my name be remembered." Gulnar Hatun frowned but said nothing. Somewhere deep inside, she recognized the same defiance she had once buried within herself. When the final candle burned low, the old woman began the last recitation, a litany of silence. Fatma was to repeat it after her, each vow a link in the chain of her unmaking. "You will not speak before your husband unless spoken to. I will not speak. You will not contradict, question, or refuse. I will not refuse. Your joy is his joy. Your pain, unseen. My pain, unseen." When the ritual ended, Fatma collapsed onto the marble floor, her tears mixing with the rosewater poured for purification. The eunuchs outside heard only fragments, breathing that sounded like drowning, whispers like broken glass. At dawn, the door opened. Fatma emerged pale, eyes hollow. Her mother, Kosem Sultan, waited by the threshold. She said nothing, but the brief flicker in her gaze betrayed something, a recognition of sacrifice disguised as tradition. She had endured the same ritual once, decades earlier, and knew that no daughter truly survived it. Later that morning, the official court chroniclers recorded the night's events as the sacred preparation of Her Imperial Highness. There was no mention of the screams, no word of the tears staining her veil. The empire, ever meticulous in its image, knew how to polish suffering until it shone like ceremony. But servants talked. Eunuchs whispered to each other in the shadowed corridors about the sound that wouldn't leave their ears. One described it as the moment the palace forgot how to breathe. And in a way, it was true. For from that night on, the halls of Topkapi carried an echo, a faint, almost inaudible hum, like the memory of fear refusing to die. Centuries later, when historians unsealed forgotten rooms within the harem, they found faint scratches beneath a marble panel, letters carved by a desperate hand. They read, "I was here. I was real." The signature was gone, erased by time. But the story had only just begun. The courtyard glows with a strange stillness. Oil lamps sway, their flames bowing in rhythm to the cold breath of the Bosphorus wind. The marble tiles shimmer beneath the moonlight, and the shadows of cypress trees stretch long and thin across the silk carpets laid for the night's ritual. A girl kneels at the center, her forehead pressed to the ground, her small hands trembling against the woven threads dyed with cochineal red. Around her, a circle of women in veils move in deliberate silence. They are not mourners, though the air carries the weight of loss. They are instructors, once brides, once daughters, once names erased. The year is 1623. In the women's court of Topkapi Palace, a new initiate begins her training under the Talimi Ita'at, the instruction of obedience. The girl's name was once Aish. By sunrise, it will be gone. An attendant steps forward. She wears a gown of dark green silk, her sleeves edged with pearls that glint like frost. Her voice, when she speaks, is low and steady. "Rise, but not as yourself." Aishi obeys. Her knees crack softly as she lifts her head, eyes fixed on the jeweled sandals before her. The elder woman's hand rests under her chin, tilting it just enough to meet her gaze. "From this night," she continues, "you will answer to no name. You will speak only when spoken to. You will smile when sorrow rises. You will love without memory." Each word lands like a chisel against marble, precise, cold, permanent. Somewhere beyond the courtyard walls, the call to prayer drifts through the night. It mingles with the whisper of silk, the quiet sound of measured breath. The women surrounding Aish move as one, a choreography honed through generations. Their gestures are soft but absolute, the folding of sleeves, the lowering of veils, the dipping of heads in perfect unison. This is not a lesson in reverence. It is rehearsal for disappearance. Historians would later uncover fragments of this ritual in scattered manuscripts, records from court physicians, fragments of letters, notes penned by foreign envoys who glimpsed the women's quarters and called it a theater of grace and silence. But inside the empire, it was law, unwritten yet absolute. The Talimi Itat began with 3 vows. The first was of stillness. No woman of the harem would move without intention. The second, restraint. No sound of laughter or protest would rise above a whisper. The third, obliteration. Every former identity, tribe, tongue, faith, was to dissolve into the Sultan's shadow. Aishi's lips part as she recites the first vow, her voice thin but unwavering. "I shall not speak, for my heart is not mine." The elder nods. "And whose heart is it?" "It belongs to the Padishah," Aishi whispers. Silence stretches. The elder's eyes glint beneath her veil, something between pride and pity. "Good," she murmurs. "Now, forget the rest." The women encircle her again. Rosewater is poured into silver basins and hands dip into it, scattering droplets across her hair and shoulders. The scent is sweet at first, then cloying. Beneath the perfume lies something metallic, sharp, the faint odor of blood drawn earlier in the ceremony. A drop had been taken from her finger and placed on parchment, pressed with a seal bearing the imperial tughra. Her body belongs to the court now. One of the matrons, once a Georgian concubine, hums a low melody. It is not a lullaby, it is a lament. The tune wavers through the courtyard, filling the cold spaces between the arches. "In obedience, we vanish," she sings softly, "and in vanishing, we are remembered." The irony lingers like incense. As the ritual deepens, the young girl is taught gestures of reverence, how to bow without losing balance, how to pour tea without sound, how to smile as if joy were duty. Each movement is corrected until perfection is indistinguishable from submission. Pain, the elder says, is not to be shown. To flinch is to fail. A woman's silence is the empire's honor. Her words echo through the columns, past the lattice screens where eunuchs stand guard, their eyes fixed forward. Beyond them, the Sultan's pavilion glows faintly, a reminder of the power that never sleeps, even as the city outside dreams. Aishi's reflection shimmers on the water basin. For a moment, she hesitates. She does not see herself, only the reflection of the elder standing behind her, and beyond that, countless faces fading into darkness. "Will I see my mother again?" she asks quietly. The elder pauses. "In obedience, there are no mothers." The girl's eyes close. A tear slips down her cheek, vanishing into the rosewater below. Hours pass, marked not by clocks but by the slow extinguishing of lamps. One by one, the flames die until only the moon remains, a cold witness to the transformation complete. When dawn creeps into the courtyard, Aish rises, not as a girl, but as a shadow. Her silence is flawless. Somewhere within the palace archives, a scribe will later note her name beside a date, then strike it through with a single line. The ceremony of obedience ends as it began, in quiet. But the question lingers, carried on the morning wind that slips through the marble corridors. How many voices were trained to vanish before the world learned to listen? The answer, buried beneath centuries of silk and silence, still trembles beneath the stones of Topkapi. The earth beneath the palace was not silent. It only waited. When the archaeologists first broke ground in the gardens of Topkapi, their shovels struck something that wasn't stone, a soft, hollow echo. Beneath layers of jasmine roots and centuries of fallen petals, they uncovered what the empire had long denied: bones wrapped in silk, fragments of jewelry crushed by time, and whispers, buried so deep they seemed to rise from the soil itself. Istanbul's sun fell heavy on the scene, but the air grew colder, as if the ground remembered pain. For years, these findings were dismissed as ceremonial burials for attendants or servants. But as the excavations deepened, the pattern emerged. Graves arranged in perfect symmetry, each marked by traces of gold embroidery and shattered glass beads, the kind once used to adorn imperial veils. It wasn't just a burial ground, it was a forgotten archive. Among the fragments, historians found something stranger still: ivory combs etched with faint Ottoman script, personal prayers disguised as decorative lines. One read, barely legible, "Silence is our rebellion." Another, "The rose remembers even when the gardener forgets." The women of the palace, once erased, were speaking again. Inside the museum wing overlooking the Bosphorus, the curator, Dr. Leila Karaka, laid the recovered artifacts under glass. They weren't merely obedient, she told the press in 2017. They were recording resistance, in code, in craft, in secrecy. Her voice trembled, not from uncertainty but awe. Behind her, a newly restored miniature painting flickered under restoration light, a group of veiled women at prayer. At first glance, nothing unusual, but under infrared analysis, faint inscriptions emerged on the hem of their garments, names deliberately scraped out, then rewritten in hidden pigment. Each was a ghost signature. Layla turned to her assistant. "They wanted to be remembered," she said softly, "and they trusted the walls more than the scribes. The deeper the team dug, the more the palace transformed. Hidden corridors led to sealed rooms filled with air still scented faintly of rose oil and myrrh. There they found thin clay tablets, likely made by the women themselves, pressed with impressions of hairpins and rings. One bore a mark shaped like a teardrop. On the back, scratched in haste, was a phrase that stunned the translators: "If I cannot reign, I will remain." The archaeologists worked in near silence, aware that each discovery shifted history's center of gravity. Historians began to piece together the story of the Sukutun Kadınları, the women of silence. Not rebels with swords, but rebels with memory. While the empire recorded their obedience, they recorded each other, inside secret compartments, under layers of embroidery, within coded prayers. Their defiance was not loud, it was deliberate. Letters found behind a collapsed marble fountain told of princesses who smuggled messages through perfume bottles, soaked in rosewater and sealed with wax. One addressed "To my sister beyond the iron gate" read, "Our silence is not surrender. It is the veil that hides our truth until time becomes brave enough to uncover it." Centuries later, that veil was finally lifted. Yet, even as evidence mounted, some questioned the narrative. Could these artifacts truly belong to imperial women? The Ottoman records were near perfect, too perfect. Every page balanced, every genealogy intact. No mention of disappearances, no record of a ritual gone wrong. And yet, beneath the Sultan's rose gardens, there were more than 40 unmarked graves, all women, all buried in ceremonial formation. Was this devotion or disposal? As journalists and historians debated, Istanbul itself seemed to stir. Locals began leaving white roses at the palace gates. Visitors whispered that, at night, when the sea mist rolled in, the lattice screens near the women's courtyard rattled softly, though no wind was strong enough to move them. Guards reported hearing the faint sound of footsteps along the colonnades, followed by the smell of rose oil and burning myrrh. Ghost stories, some said. But one evening, as restoration workers repaired the cracked marble of the harem's fountain, water suddenly began flowing through the old channel again, clear, cold, and carrying fragments of gold thread. When tested, the fibers matched the burial silks from the garden. The palace had remembered. Underneath the glittering domes and tourist laughter, the real Topkapi whispered its confession. Every gilded ceiling, every painted dome, every gilded lattice was not merely art, it was an echo of someone's endurance. For centuries, these women had been reduced to myth, their names erased to make the empire seem whole. Yet here, at last, their story surfaced, not as vengeance, but as vindication. Dr. Layla stood again by the garden where the excavation began. The sun was setting, casting molten gold across the palace domes. She knelt beside one of the open pits, her gloved hand brushing the dust from a small silver pendant. Its back bore a single, unbroken word: remember. She exhaled, barely a whisper. We will. And as the call to evening prayer echoed through Istanbul, mingling with the cries of gulls over the Bosphorus, it sounded less like devotion and more like remembrance, a chorus rising from the earth itself. The marble walls, once silent, seemed to breathe again, because history, no matter how carefully it's buried, always finds a voice. And tonight, under the ghost-lit domes of Topkapi, that voice was finally speaking.